You are now listening to Redbeard Talks Redbirds, your home for all things Cardinals baseball. All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. This is Redbeard Talks Redbirds. I've got Dave Brown here with me today, and you've got a really cool new book out, Shadows of Glory, Memorable and Offbeat Stories, World Series Stories. And I've been kind of going through here and taking a look at some of it, and I've found a lot of really neat, interesting things. I've learned some things, I've remembered some things, and I've had a lot of fun taking a look at it so far. Um, what can you tell me about this book and why you guys wanted to write it?
Well, Alex, it's Jeff Rodheimer and I, college fraternity brothers from Gettysburg College, Central Pennsylvania, met in 1979. And, both of us have been baseball junkies since we were little kids. And, in addition to watching baseball, we love the stats, the trivia, the story, love
Oh, we may have lost Dave. Let's see. Oh, you're back.
Yeah, so sorry about that.
That's all right. Go ahead. Pennsylvania, loving the stats.
Yeah, we love the stats and trivia and stories associated with baseball and like reading about it. And, we both have an interest in writing. And I've written some prior baseball books, one about former Cardinal pitcher Steve Carlton. And, of course, he was traded to the Phillies for Rick Wise in before the 72 season. And Carlton won 27 games for that Phillies team that only won 59 games. So that, that became a book. Jeff didn't join me for that one, but, we were just, talking about the World Series and how, there's many, many iconic World Series moments. Don Larson's perfect game, Bill Mazeroski's game-winning home run in 1960, and Kirk Gibson's home run to win Game 1 of the '88 series. And those are tremendous moments, but they've been written about, talked about so much. We thought that we would try to focus on stories that are lesser well known, that even hardcore baseball fans might not be aware of. So we came up with 18 stories just based on a lot of research and talking to people. And it goes back to 1918 when Babe Ruth and World War I and the Spanish flu intersected, until 2016 when the Cubs, of course, broke their drought of 108 years and finally won the World Series. And, some of the stories are just kind of outrageous, and some of them are funny, and some of them are heartwarming and heartbreaking. It's, it's a little bit of everything, some on the field, some off the field. And, very fun book to research and write. And I just hope that, baseball fans would find it enjoyable.
Yeah. One thing that I did have some fun with is some of these stories that surround owners that are interesting and have their way and what they're trying to do and flex their muscles over certain things, whether it be gameplay or players or who's allowed in and not, and just the different personalities coming out. And that was pretty interesting and entertaining for some of those stories.
Yeah, and I think the one that stands out most in that category was the 1973 series between the Oakland A's and the New York Mets. And Charlie Finley was the owner of the A's, just very bombastic and outspoken.
Yeah.
It was his way or the highway, and he really rubbed his players the wrong way. Dick Williams, he had a tremendous manager. Williams did not see eye to eye with them. And, despite all that, they win the World Series in 72. They're back in the series in 73. And heading into the series, Finley wanted Manny Trio, very young player. He just had a handful of at bats in the majors. He wanted Trio on the roster, but Dick Williams wanted Mike Andrews, who had 7 years experience in the majors. He was on the 67 Red Sox. Williams wanted Andrews. And so as it turns out, Andrews was on the roster, and Finley was a little upset about that, and the Mets would not. The Mets could have agreed that Trio be on the roster, but they wouldn't. Um, so it was Andrews, and in Game 2 of that series, it's goes into extra innings, and in the 12th inning, Andrews is in the game, commits a couple of errors, and it contributes to the A's losing that game. And Finley was just absolutely furious about that. If only Manny Trio was on the roster, that wouldn't have happened. So incredibly, Finley just gets one of the A's team doctors to cook up this false report that Andrews was disabled due to a right shoulder injury and could not play in the series anymore. And Andrews was called in and pressured to sign it, and he just felt like he had no choice but to do that. This was long before, or at least before agents were around. So his hands were tied. So he is off the roster. And when the A's players and Dick Williams catch wind of this, they just cannot believe what Charlie Finley did, and they thought it was so fair to do that to Andrews. And as it turns out, the Commissioner Bowie Kuhn stepped in and overruled Finley's decision and said, "No, you can't just take him off the roster for a bogus reason." It's remarkable. And so, Andrews had gone home, and then he was back for Game 4. And when he pinch hit at Shea Stadium late in the game, he got a standing ovation from the Mets fans, which is, they're not too quick, New York fans, to give a visiting player a standing ovation. But I think they viewed Andrews as, here's the little guy, kind of wins the battle against the big powerful owner. And
Yeah.
that was a nice touch. And Finley was just thought it was so wrong that Kuhn intervened, and he thought, he's the owner, he can do what he wants. And so incredible, the A's win that World Series, and they really were a loaded team with Reggie Jackson and Catfish Hunter and Raleigh Fingers. A very, very good team. Won their second consecutive World Series, and despite that, Dick Williams said, he quit. He had just had enough with Finley.
Yeah.
And the owner is a completely obnoxious when you win 2 straight World Series and you bail out. So but yeah, that was a crazy story, to say the least.
Yeah, I guess I wasn't fully aware of how good the A's were at that time and how good they could have continued to be had they not basically, torn themselves apart because of Finley in large part.
Yeah, well, that's exactly right. I mean, they won one more World Series with Alvin Dark in '74, and then all of a sudden, it's just he was for budgetary reasons and other reasons, he's trading players, and the Catfish Hunter signs with the Yankees, and all of a sudden, the A's turned into a pretty bad team in the late '70s. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, Finley was kind of George Steinbrenner-ish, and just it was his team, and he ran it the way he wanted to, and that caused a lot of clashes with players and managers.
Yeah. It doesn't seem like that type of style happens as much anymore, at least not out in public. Let's say it that way.
No, No, it sure doesn't. I think that's a thing of the past. I mean,
Another thing that I did get to learn quite a bit about was your chapter on the Negro Leagues. And when I say Negro Leagues, it's because there were so many different leagues kind of coming and going, and teams moving and players jumping teams. It was very unorganized, which is sad, but at the same time, it's so interesting that they were able to kind of keep it going and do what they did and produce such quality players and the different stories inside of all that. I enjoyed that one, just learning a little bit more there.
yeah, thanks. And I mean, I have to tell you, it was a learning experience for me. I mean, I knew some of the information in the chapter, but not a lot. But hey, as you say, Satchel Paige, Josh Gibson, there were great players in that league, and so unfair that they weren't able to play in the major leagues until 1947. And yeah, they had a World Series for a few years in the 20s, and then they
Hmm.
they didn't in the 30s, and then it came back in the 40s. And one of the things that was eye opening is that they had the Negro Leagues had an all-star game that was really for a while the biggest event, and they like several years drew more fans than the MLB all-star game did. So that says something about the popularity of that game. And in the World Series, in '42, which was featured in the book, and Homestead Grays and Josh Gibson and the Kansas City Monarchs, led by Satchel Paige. And um, they didn't just have these teams didn't have a stadium that they could just play at day after day. I mean, they played second fiddle to minor league teams in the major leagues, and sometimes they would play
Yeah.
some of their games in other cities, and there would be they would play exhibition games. And they played, like, in that series the Monarchs won the first three, and then their stadium wasn't available until the minor league team at the Yankees organization based in Kansas City finished their season, and that took a week. And then there was an exhibition game, and it got crazy where Homestead Grays had picked up some top players from other teams in the Negro League to play in this exhibition game, and they were so good
Yeah.
they I think we'll add them to the roster for the World Series game. And they do that, and they win the game, and Kansas City protests and says, no, you can't add all these ringers at the last minute. And that game gets tossed out. And as it turns out, there was a 16-day delay between game 3 and game 4. And but yeah, I mean, I really wanted to shed light on they Negro League World Series deserved its due. And just when they opened the doors to black players in the majors,
Yeah.
Will Hank Aaron, Ernie Banks, Roy Campanella, like so many of the MVPs were won by black players. I mean, it's just completely changed baseball.
For the better, absolutely. So, obviously, we are Cardinal heavy on this podcast. Can we talk a little Cardinal stuff? Like,
Oh,
you've got some stuff in here from 2011, and I think we all know what happened on the field. What else was going on?
well, David Freese. I mean, his backstory is interesting. I mean, he grew up in the um, suburbs of St. Louis, and he was a very good high school player. And then, he was dealing with some personal issues with depression, and for a while he stopped playing baseball, and then he got back into it. And he still had his issues that he was working through, and wasn't living the most healthy lifestyle. And and he was when finally the Padres drafted him, and then the Cardinals picked him up in a trade, and he was a good, solid hitter playing third base, and I mean, just what he did in that 2011 World Series just rivals what the all-time great players have done in that series. I mean, that
Of
really has
course.
to, when you guys are down to one strike in the bottom of the ninth of Game 6, and um, David delivers a 2-run triple to deep right field, and that's just an unforgettable moment. And then he tops it off by hitting a game-winning home run in the 11th inning, and then gets a big hit in Game 7, and then all of a sudden he's a celebrity and he's on Jay Leno's show, and yeah, good for him. It was really, really impressive, and he went on to have a pretty solid major league career, and um, so yeah, that was something, and we in fact we have a picture of Freeze on the cover of the book, and because that's just such a great moment when he's approaching home plate, and
Right
after
there.
run, that was just a joyous moment for him. But it's and as I mentioned in the book, his accomplishments were so remarkable when you think this was a guy who woke up some days and said to himself, I can't believe I'm still here. I mean, that's how tough life was for him. And, sometimes people are dealing with, they might be great athletes, but they have issues like we all do. And
Yeah.
it was a real struggle for David Freese to overcome them. And, it's just commendable that he did.
That's true, 100%. That's interesting because I think that same mentality kind of came out when he decided to decline the invitation to join the Cardinals Hall of Fame. I think there's definitely arguments for him to be part of it. Probably the strongest arguments are what happened in 2011. There's definitely arguments for him to not be a part of it, but I don't think I've ever heard of anyone declining an invitation like that. And that was very interesting. And in some ways, I find it commendable. And in other ways, I think that it's exactly that same stuff that you're talking about.
Yeah, sure. And I mean, I chalk it up to him being so humble. I think you tell me if you take it the same way, that he's like, hey, thanks a lot, Cardinals. I much appreciate this request to be part of the team's Hall of Fame, but there are better players than me who deserve it more.
Yeah,
I just think that's remarkable humility. Like,
I agree. I'm kind of torn on it. I feel like that's one of those things where the fans voted to have you as part of the Hall of Fame. So in some ways you're kind of, I guess, for lack of a better way to say it, thumbing your nose at the fans to some degree. And yeah, I'm sure there's a recency bias, and okay, yeah, we got a World Series out of it. So, it's circumstantial, but at the same time, that's an iconic couple moments that I don't know if it's ever going to be outdone, really. And so I think it's also one of those things where St. Louis fans want to celebrate accomplishments. And I see it both ways. I
yeah,
appreciate it both ways.
I mean, I see what you're saying. I mean, if the Cardinals fans voting him on, he should have accepted. Um, if somebody was voted on to the All-Star game one year and said, nah, so and so's having a better season than I am, I don't deserve it. You should still recognize the fans and playing
Yeah.
that. So yeah, I definitely see what you're saying, and um, yeah, absolutely.
Either way.
Yeah.
Well, so what else can you tell us? Did you have any stories that you were really excited about in this book, or maybe some that you guys cut from the list and didn't make the book that you find interesting?
I would say that couple that stand out for me that were included in the book that we found most interesting. And Jeff's actually a Yankees fan from northern New Jersey. I grew up in Philly, and always been a Phillies fan. And um, a story that always I found quite entertaining is that Cliff Lee. The Phillies won the World Series in 2008. They beat Tampa Bay. They're a strong team in 2009. And Charlie Manuel's the manager, Ryan Howard, Chase Utley, Jimmy Rollins, Cole Hamels, very good team, but they
Oh,
want to
yeah.
strengthen the team. So they get Cliff Lee at the trade deadline from Cleveland, who had won the Cy Young Award, and he quickly fits in and just pitching very well, becomes a fan favorite. So when they make it to the World Series, Charlie Manuel names him to be the starting pitcher for game one at Yankee Stadium. And, I think a lot of people know that, Cliff delivered an incredible performance that night. He was facing Mark Teixeira, Alex Rodriguez, Derek Jeter, Robinson Cano. I mean, this was a loaded Yankees lineup. And yet he held them to one run, which was unearned, didn't walk anybody, struck out 10. He was just dazzling. But what's not as well known is that he had quite a chaotic commute to the ballpark that night in that, it was an 8 o'clock game. Most players just took the team bus up in the afternoon. Cliff kind of hung back, chilling out at the hotel, catches a cab late in the afternoon, and gets like about halfway to Yankee Stadium, and then all of a sudden they're stuck in a huge traffic jam, and the cabbie calls dispatch and finds that it's going to take about 2 hours for you to get to Yankee Stadium, and the start of the game was 2 hours away. So Lee is, he never pitched in a World Series, and the thought of not making it on time for a World Series start, game one at Yankee Stadium, it was, quite a concern. And he called his agent, he called the Phillies director of travel, explained the predicament, like, what do I do here? And they said, well, why don't you try to find a police officer in the area, and he can give you an escort up to Yankee Stadium. And there were no police officers around, so that wasn't an option. And in the meantime, the director of travel let the Phillies pitching coach Rich Doobie know what was going on, because if Cliff could make it to the stadium in time, Charlie Manuel had to get an emergency starter up ready to pitch this game. That was the predicament there. So, but finally, Cliff, the cab is still just inching along, and then he has a brilliant idea. When he pitched for Cleveland, sometimes he would take the subway from the hotel up to Yankee Stadium. And, he was a guy from Arkansas, from the country, and the New York subway system can't be easy to navigate for somebody who's not from that area. There's no way. But yet he figured that was his best bet to make it to the ballpark. And they were pretty close to a subway station. He jumped out, paid the fare, got on the subway, apparently was not recognized by anybody on the subway. I'm sure it was mostly Yankees fans, but he just kind of blended in. He had to change trains on the way to take a second subway to make it to the Bronx. And he finally got there. And then 2009 was the first year of the new Yankee Stadium. And when he had taken the subway before, when he was with Cleveland, they were playing at the old Yankee Stadium. So he knew how to get into the players' entrance at the old Yankee Stadium, but not the new Yankee Stadium. And he didn't know what to do. He couldn't find his way in. So he called the Phillies director of travel again and said, I'm here, but I don't know how to get in the ballpark. And he said, well, listen, there's a McDonald's right across the street from Yankee Stadium. Why don't you just stand in front of that, and we'll send somebody over to pick you up? And that's exactly what happened. And they brought him in, and he was, just got dressed and went out there and took his warm up pitches, and I think that kind of chaos could have thrown some players off their game, but I think that Cliff, despite all that, um, he just pitched an absolutely phenomenal game, and that story we Jeff and I always thought was really entertaining.
That is so interesting. I feel like there are people that, like you said, would really be thrown off, but then I think that there's also a lot of people, I'd put myself in this category where things like that happen and it takes you out of your head. And so you're not thinking about all the things coming up. And once you get out there, you just start executing because you haven't had time to mess yourself up.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, I mean that's no question. I mean he had to. All he could think, he wasn't in the cab. He's not thinking about how do I get Derek Jeter out. It's like how do I get to the ballpark?
Exactly.
And then yeah, when he got on the mound, it's like okay, now it's all business. And um, yeah, he was lights out that night, and um, Phillies couldn't quite overcome the Yankees in the series, but um, Cliff won their only two games, and so yeah, that kind of story, was a favorite. And I mean, another favorite story, and um, of course, as we know, a few weeks ago, at the beginning of the NFL season, Tyreek Hill um,
Mhm.
gets arrested before a Dolphins game on his way to the Dolphins game. He has a disagreement with a police officer, and um, the next thing you know, he's arrested, and but he plays the game a couple hours later and has a great game.
Yeah.
Just and just while working on this book, we learned that back in 1920, um, Cleveland Indians, Brooklyn Dodgers, that Brooklyn had a pitcher, Rube Marquard, who eventually made the Hall of Fame. I mean, he still holds the record for the most wins at the beginning of a season without a loss. He started the 1912 season for the New York Giants 19-0. Which is just remarkable. But he was, a little later in his career with 1920, he was with Brooklyn, not the number one starter, but still in the rotation. And he was from Cleveland, and he was in the hotel at the Cleveland hotel, and it's hard to believe, but he had eight tickets that face value of $5, $6, $7 that he wanted to scalp to make a little extra money. And you can't imagine a player these days having any need to make a little extra money scalping tickets, but that's what
Right.
Rube wanted to do. And he wanted to get 40, $50 for each ticket. And there was scalping was a pretty big thing then. And somebody approached him and said, hey, you have any tickets? And Rube discreetly pulled him out. I said, yeah, I got 8. This is what I'm looking for. And the guy said, no thanks. And then moments later, an undercover detective came up to Marquard, and they were on the lookout for scalping, and said, sir, you've just violated the law. You're not allowed to scalp tickets. And he tried to make up some excuse, but bottom line is he was arrested, taken to the police station, and then 3-4 hours later he pitches in that game and throws 3 shutout innings. So obviously that didn't, getting arrested didn't throw him off his game. And
Well, my question is, what happened to those tickets? Did they get used?
well, yeah, that is a good question. That I'm not sure about, but yeah, it'd be a shame if those 8 tickets were wasted. Maybe the police just confiscated them, and maybe they went themselves. That's a good point, um, but it really tarnished his reputation, not to the point that, this was just, not long after the whole Black Sox scandal. Those guys, got kicked out of baseball and, everything that, but with Marquard, the Dodgers owner was really disgusted with what he did, and released him after the season. And there was a little bit of a kind of a mini trial that a judge held after the World Series and found them guilty. And there was a small fine, nothing too bad, but the National League president really spoke negatively about Marquard and thought that really, just tarnished the reputation of the game, because players should not be scalping tickets.
Yeah.
But it did, he pitched a few more years in the majors with the Boston Braves, and he eventually, he made the Hall of Fame. So that didn't keep him out of the Hall. So, but again, just such an offbeat story, and thought that would be something people would have fun reading about.
I love it. That's good stuff. So this is Shadows of Glory, memorable and offbeat stories from the World Series. And where can folks find out more about you guys or this book specifically?
Well, Jeff Roedemer, my co-author, and I have a website, shadowsofglorybook.com, and can go to that website and read more, order a copy if anybody's interested. It's also available on Amazon, all the online sites and the Barnes and Noble stores. So yeah, it's easy enough to get for anybody who's interested.
I love it. Well, we got the postseason going on right now, and we'll see what happens. Tigers are awfully interesting at the moment.
Well, it's just hard to believe. It's
Yeah.
the playoffs just tend to be such a crapshoot. I really thought, without question, the Astros would beat the Tigers and the Orioles would beat the Royals. And the Orioles went out quickly last year in the
The
playoffs.
Orioles scored 1 run in 2 games.
Ah,
Honestly, I thought they were going to win the World Series this year.
yeah, I mean, they are
Oh,
absolutely.
that was painful.
Yeah, it's amazing. At home with all of those get good hitters that they have, and playing it. It's just and it must be so disappointing for for their fans. You
Yeah.
have a great 162 games. You don't quite beat out the Yankees, but still you're in a good position to go to the next round. And kind of likewise with the Brewers. It's amazing that they've never won a World Series, and they've had a lot of great players and great teams. And I was concerned as a Phillies fan, like if the Phillies play the
Well,
Brewers division series, the Brewers could easily beat them. And then they take a 2-0 lead in the ninth inning last night, decisive game 3, and give up a 3-run homer to Pete Alonso. And that just has to really just de-
yeah.
devastate that franchise. But then that's what makes baseball a great game. It's
It is interesting. I feel like the Brewers have kind of overachieved for a few years now. But I also feel like they're kind of playing the style of game and getting the type of players that the Cardinals used to do, and they're kind of turning the tables on us and making us look bad. So I'm getting tired of that.
yeah, well, that probably will change in 2025. And yeah, I hope Paul Goldschmidt. I know he had an off year, and these power hitters get into their mid 30s, and sometimes they just lose a little bit of their power. And but that's one great player who's headed
Man,
to the.
I love Goldie. And I would categorize him kind of the same style of player as like an Albert Pujols. Obviously not as good. We're not going to say that. We're not going to get close to that. He's on his own level. But same style of player. I wouldn't say he's a power hitter. I'd say he's a good hitter with some power. But yeah, he's fallen off quite a bit past couple seasons. But I actually went to the same school as he did, got to see him play some there, and
Oh,
always been a big Goldie fan. So I wish him nothing but the best.
yeah, yeah, sure. Yeah, seems like a real good guy. And but yeah, Albert was just in a league of his own. I mean,
Yeah.
those numbers that he put together for the Cardinals were just staggering.
Oh yeah.
I mean, he was just one of the best players in baseball every single season, and it was so nice to see him come back to St. Louis
Oh shit, man, that was so much fun.
and hit 24 home runs and a little more than 300 at bats at his
Well,
age.
if you throw out the first 2 or 3 months of the season, his second, 3 or 4 months were just amazing.
At that, yeah, it is. It's just, yeah, what an athlete, and
Yeah, it was a good time.
yeah, what a good what a so. But is that like, um, the Cardinals had all those great teams in the '80s with Whitey Herzog, and
Yep.
do Cardinals fans tend to remember those teams the most, or is it the 2011 team that stands out?
Well, I think with anything, there's some recency bias. Cardinals it's very much like a family thing for Cardinals fans. Your kids are going to be Cardinals fans, and their kids are going to be Cardinals fans. So I would say Cardinals fans are more educated on their team and their sport than most typical fans. Um, so I mean, there's huge appreciation going to the 60s and even before if you've got folks that are around that remember any of that. Um, but yeah, we remember a lot from, let's say, starting with LaRussa. Whitey Ball is revered.
Yeah,
Everyone loves Whitey Ball. Ozzie Smith, always been my favorite player.
yeah,
But, Tony La Russa comes over and you've got Albert that comes up. We trade for Scott Rowland. We trade for Jim Edmonds. I specifically remember like the 2004 season. In my opinion, that's arguably one of the best Cardinal baseball teams we ever had. You're talking Reggie Sanders in left, Jim Edmonds in center. You've got Larry Walker in right field, who we traded for from the Rockies. You got Roland on third base. You got Edgar Renteria at short, who just a few years before then was a stud for the Marlins in their World Series win.
yeah.
You got Albert at first. I think we had, was it Fernando Vina at second? And then we got, Matt Morris and Chris Carpenter, and it was a stud team. And the Red Sox, they had momentum and they're chasing history and just couldn't be stopped.
Yeah, no, that is a strong team the Cardinals had. And yeah, I mean, after coming back and beating the Yankees down 3-0, it's just, yeah, momentum is critical. And that's that's
It's actually something about today's game and today's playoff system that is crazy to me. Whether you think it's good, whether you think it's bad, most of the teams that are having good success in the playoffs are wild card teams, or teams, maybe they're not wild card, but they're a lower seed of a divisional winner. And it's all about momentum. You're talking about Detroit, you're talking about Kansas City, and other teams for 10, 15 years now, where these teams just barely squeak by, get into the playoffs. You're talking 2011 St. Louis Cardinals. You're talking 2006 St. Louis Cardinals. You've
yeah.
got all these teams that just barely get into the playoffs, and it's all about momentum. Whereas these teams that have won the division, they've got 100 plus wins. They they pull back, they rest some of their guys, they lose their momentum, and the playoffs start, and they just don't have it. You see it time and time again. So I'm not entirely sure why. I don't know if it's good. I don't know if it's bad, but it's interesting.
Well, there is no question about what you're saying. I mean, there's you think about the last 2 years in the National League. I mean, the Dodgers and Braves had these really good teams,
Yeah.
and yet the Phillies beat the Braves in both the 22 and 23 playoffs. I don't think fans really expected that. And then the Dodgers got beaten by the Padres in 22 and the Diamondbacks in 23, and it
Yes.
like the week off, must contribute to that. And is it better off not getting the bye? Maybe. We'll see what happens.
Certainly seems like it.
Yeah, no question. I mean, it's the Mets come into Philly with all that, um, momentum. They had the dramatic win against the Braves to get into the playoffs, and
Yeah.
then go 3 outs away from being eliminated last night and come through. And the Phillies. I mean, the bottom line is there was winning the division was really never in question. So they haven't had any real meaningful games in quite a while. So now they do. Can they step
Yeah.
it up, beat the Mets? We don't know. And
Right
Dodgers.
now, if I'm betting on who's going to win, I'm probably picking Kansas City, who we know is a good team. They're not coming out of nowhere. They've been good all year. Or I'm thinking the Mets, because
Yeah,
they both got momentum.
yeah, they sure do. And the Padres have some momentum too. They really played great second half of the season, and disposed of the Braves pretty easily. And
Yeah.
there's another team that they've been playing 55 years and have never won a World Series. And that's just got to hurt for fans. You watch your team as a kid, and you're in your 60s or 70s, and they still haven't won a series. And
Oh, it's gut wrenching. We've
yeah,
both been there.
yeah, yeah. I mean, that's for sure. I mean, the Phillies didn't win a series until 1980, and that's in writing this book, it was kind of a reminder of just all the World Series the Yankees have won, and how few so many other teams. Phillies have only won 2, and the Pirates have only won 4, and it's just something.
Yeah, it's been a little bit for the Pirates. They were good in the 70s.
Yeah, they sure were. And it's just tough to compete without them bringing in big time free agents. And they got an amazing amazing pitcher on their staff, but he can't
We'll
do it.
see how long he stays there.
Yeah, you wonder. I mean, he was sensational this season, but and yeah, how long does he stay with the Pirates? Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. And when he's of course Garrett Cole was on the Pirates, and
Yep.
for a few years, and had to be tough for Pirates fans to see him go.
Oh yeah.
So that's
Well, I'll let you go. I know you got more to get to, but again, one more time, Shadows of Glory, offbeat stories from the World Series, and I think it's very well written. I'm enjoying it. I got a little bit more to go. Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it.
yeah. Thanks a lot, Alex. Appreciate it. It was very fun.
All right, Dave. Have a good one.
Yep. Enjoy the postseason. Yep.
Yes, sir. You too.
Hey, y'all, thank you so much once again for joining us for this episode of Redbeard Talks Redbirds podcast. Make sure you go over there, hit like and subscribe for this channel, and don't forget to hit that notification button. Make sure you don't miss the next episode. Let's go Cardinals!